The former South African President Jacob Zuma has launched a last-ditch attempt to avoid a corruption trial. Zuma is facing charges of fraud, corruption, racketeering and money laundering related to the $5 billion arms deal of the late 1990s. The former statesman has fought the charges for 10 years and now has made a new application for a permanent stay of prosecution, which would close the case for good. Zuma faces the case alongside French arms company Thales, which is accused of bribing him. The 77-year-old says the case is nothing but a political conspiracy. His legal counsel says it'll prove to the court through spy tapes involving investigators and the prosecution that Zuma is a victim of political bias.
We think the National Prosecuting Authority subscribes to in the manner in which they have dealt with Mr. Zuma. I called it the mob justice. It's driven and inspired by something all of us in this room have, to varying degrees. It's bias.
Let's get more on this now with Crystal Orderson, who joins us from Cape Town. Hi, Crystal. As I mentioned, these charges levelled against Jacob Zuma have been swirling for many years now. Tell us more about what he's accused of.
Good evening. So indeed, it's been actually 15 years and Jacob Zuma has been asking for his day in court and it's finally arrived. And it's 16 charges related to this multi-billion-dollar arms deal of the late 90s. It was supposed to be the deal for South Africa, setting itself apart from its other African peers, but it was marred by corruption. And a close ally of Jacob Zuma, Schabir Shaik, was found guilty. And Zuma's lawyers believe that Shaik's case was simply just used to actually get him. And so he wants the court to decide that, the case should be null and void. But in fact, for a lot of South Africans, they want to see some sort of justice. We're looking at 16 charges, which include corruption, money laundering, racketeering, and fraud. For Zuma, and as we heard, his legal representative arguing very emotionally that, it's mob justice, the case is an intersection of law and politics. And I think this is where South Africans are saying, well, enough is enough. Can we actually get a legal case here? And can we actually hear the legal arguments of why there should be a permanent stay of execution?
And this was the first day of those proceedings to have the charges in this particular case thrown out. So tell us how the first day went.
So it's only Zuma's lawyers who actually had the opportunity to address the court. And so throughout this argument, it was again something that we've heard before, very emotional, it's mob justice. There are elements within the prosecutorial authority that hates him, very strong emotive words on why this case should be thrown out of court, essentially. And so, for instance, we heard the lawyer saying that, for so long, there's been so much anger and people just want to see Jacob Zuma in jail. And, this shouldn't be the case. And so we actually didn't hear any substantive matter in terms of what is the legal argument. Can you prove there was no corruption or money laundering or racketeering? Show us the actual evidence. Instead, what we've heard and what we've heard before, very emotional, it's mob justice, it's an intersection of law and politics, and Jacob Zuma will never have a fair trial because South Africans feel so emotive about the name of Jacob Zuma. And I think, of course, it's a legal case, so one would assume that you must build a legal argument to actually have a permanent stay of prosecution of this case.
Yes, and the newly elected President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to root out corruption from within his own party. What is the President's view on his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, in that respect?
I think firstly, especially a mere 10 days after the election, there's a lot of pressure from the public, from analysts, from the market to see that President Cyril Ramaphosa, who will be sort of elected tomorrow here in Parliament, that he actually acts against corrupt activities within the ANC. Now, the Jacob Zuma case has been a very emotive one, and it's split the African National Congress, the ruling party, right in the middle, because, of course, there are some that argues that he should be held accountable for not only the arms deal, but other cases that has arisen and that we've heard subsequently being told at the State Capture Inquiry Commission looking into corrupt activities. But I do think for Jacob Zuma, it is still, for Cyril Ramaphosa, it's still early days. His inauguration is only taking place on Saturday. So he's very cautious of taking a very, coming out publicly and talking about the corruption trial of Jacob Zuma, because he knows that Jacob Zuma still has a lot of support, not only in his hometown of KwaZulu-Natal, but also within the African National Congress. For instance, Jacob Zuma still attends National Executive Committee meetings, which means that he is still present in those meetings when Cyril Ramaphosa talks. So I think President Cyril Ramaphosa is not going to come out to say much of this trial, because he knows that it's still early days for his presidency, and he also knows that Jacob Zuma still has a lot of power within the African National Congress.
Okay, and we'll see how these proceedings unfold this week. Crystal Orderson in Cape Town, thanks so much.